We are live. We are recording. Thank you very, very much, folks, for joining us today. You are at the Climate Partners Presents Maryland Agencies Climate Progress Winter Webinar. We're really excited to have a really wonderful set of presenters here today from our state leadership who are going to be able to speak to us about the progress towards Maryland's goal to get to net zero by 2045. So we're really excited to have you all here joining us in conversation, and we'll get the ball rolling. As soon as I can advance my slides. There we go. Hi, folks. Welcome again. I'm Laura Bartok. I'm the Coalition Facilitator for Maryland Climate Partners, and I will be your facilitator for the webinar today. Thank you again for joining us for our first Climate Progress Winter Webinar. We're really excited to be able to have this event very close to the release of the Climate Subcabinet Annual Report, to be able to talk about progress towards Maryland's climate goals. Today's recording and slides will be shared after the fact on the Climate Partners blog. We'll also be sending those out via email to everybody who's registered for today's webinar. Just to help set the stage for our conversation today, I wanted to share quick webinar norms. We do have caption enabled for accessibility. You can turn those on using your Zoom toolbar. We also have the Q&A feature enabled, so please use that to submit your questions for our guests. You can also use the Q&A pod to upvote questions that you want to see addressed, so please be sure to not only add your questions, but read what your fellow attendees are asking and upvote those good questions. And last but not least, a general reminder I'd like to share is please listen to understand and not just respond. We have some really high level updates and I think some really productive conversations we're going to have. And I encourage all of you to be active listeners, active participants, and do your best to listen and understand. I'll do a quick agenda review. We are in the Welcome from Climate Partners. I have just a couple of more slides to set the context before I pass the microphone to Maryland Department of the Environment Secretary Serena McElwain, who we truly appreciate having on the call today to help set the tone. After Secretary McElwain shares her opening remarks, we have 4 agency presentations from the Department of the Environment, the Maryland Energy Administration, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and the Maryland Department of Transportation. Each of our presenters will have about 10 minutes to share their high-level updates. We'll hold a couple of minutes for clarifying questions, and then we'll move into our panel discussion. We'll save any substantive questions you might have for that panel discussion, but please continue to add those questions in the chat pod throughout our conversation. We'll save a few minutes just to wrap things up at the end and end by 2:30 Eastern. Wanted to just share a quick introduction to Maryland Climate Partners for those of you who might not be familiar. We are a cross-sector coalition of 20 different organizations that focus on environmental advocacy, faith advocacy, consumer advocacy, and social justice. The coalition was originally formed in 2021 to support the passage of Climate Solutions Now Act, which set Maryland's greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal of net zero by 2045. And since that time, Climate Partners has continued to advocate for the equitable and effective implementation of policies and programs that achieve those goals set in the Climate Solutions Now Act. And we are really looking forward to a future where all Marylanders can experience the health and economic benefits of those climate solutions. We've got the link to our coalition website there if you're interested in learning more. And my last slide before I pass the microphone, just wanted to really frame our goals for today. Of course, we want to hear those key updates on agency climate actions, the priorities and challenges that they've been experiencing. But we also want to explore those intersections among all of these sectors we know are important to our climate, including economic development, housing priorities, energy, especially clean energy generation, transportation, and of course, throughout all of those, equity. Today, we'll engage with agency leaders through our questions and discussion, and ultimately, we look forward to our in-person Agencies Forum in late April. This is an event that's really setting the stage for deep conversations with agencies about their goals, their priorities, and the ways that climate advocates and community members can be supportive of climate progress. So, with that, I will stop sharing my slides. I will stop talking and I will pass the microphone to Secretary McElwain. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate your opening remarks as well. Can everyone hear me? Okay, let me start with that. Okay, good. Um, so yes, I'm really, really happy to be here, and it's good to see everyone. Just the name of your forum, Climate Partners. I mean, that is exactly what we need in Maryland. My agency, the Maryland Department of the Environment, we need partners because we cannot do this work alone. And I found it very interesting. I heard you say that you were formed in 2021, and it was really based on the Climate Solutions Now Act, which, as you know, everything in the act itself in law was very ambitious goals. And honestly, I'm just glad that you all raised your hand and said, we need to help. That's a lot because this is why we're together right now. And it kind of segues into what I want to talk about just quickly, because I will turn the mic over to other agencies. But just when you think about all that we have on our plates to deliver as a state, there's no way we can do it alone, which is why I am so happy that the governor stood tall and brought us all together, all the agencies, and said, you know what? This is not just the Department of the Environment. This is everyone. I need everyone, all of you, to be at the table and deliver on really looking at implementing what's in the Climate Solutions Now Act. And so we're doing it with speed as he requires. We're aligning everything that we're doing, and we're doing it with purpose. We have a whole of government approach that actually includes the climate implementation plans, as you know, from each agency, because you mentioned that. And this was a really important step because we need to start the process by making sure that we're implementing Maryland's climate pollution reduction plan. If you all remember, we that plan was released in December of 2023, I believe. I'm getting all my dates mixed up, but I believe it was December 2023 when we released that climate pollution reduction plan. And that plan means nothing if we don't do what we need to do, right? It's our roadmap for cutting pollution, expanding clean energy, and building resilience across the state. It's a lot. And I'm proud to tell you today that all of our agencies really did work as a team in creating those climate implementation plans that I hope you all were able to look at and read and absorb. So what it means is under Governor Moore's leadership and direction, he directed 25 agencies to produce that the first climate implementation plan, and we did it in 5 months. And I want to tell you, I have been working in the federal government for 30 years and state government almost 8 years. I have never seen that speed of work. It is rare, but it really does demonstrate that we plan to move fast and get implementation in progress and start doing what we need to do. Last year, when we issued the first climate sub-cabinet report, we took another step and we really made sure that we had and we established shared statewide climate indicators for the first time. That's important because we all know that if you're not measuring, it means absolutely nothing. And so we're really showing also how all the agencies are contributing as one when we think about the climate goals. Those performance indicators, they're capturing both direct emissions and the broader outcomes that are shaped by transportation and buildings and natural systems and community investment as well. Because again, we're serious and we're going to measure what we're doing. And to make that measurement transparent for the public, our partners, us, you'll see in the 2025 Climate Subcabinet report that the agencies didn't actually just produce plans, they actually did produce outcomes, which led to faster progress for us meeting our goals. And we did it even though, as you all know, we're really facing significant changes from the federal rollbacks that we're experiencing, and it's not making our jobs easier, it's making our jobs harder. But we're moving fast, and you can see the impact across the state because none of the accomplishments happen in isolation. They happen because these agencies are working together in the climate sub cabinet, and we're aligning like decisions that we're making now. We're sharing data. We're moving in the same direction at the same time. So no more in isolation. It's one. And I won't go through a whole lot of things, but I will say just a few things. If you think about the tree planting progress that we've made in Maryland, we planted 555,000 new trees toward the 5 million tree goal that we have. And it's not because one agency pushed harder or because the sub cabinet brought partners together or didn't bring partners together. It is actually because we all came together in real time. And agencies like the Department of Education and the Department of Juvenile Services, they came together. And it really was the reason why we were able to accelerate what we did in terms of planting those trees. When you think about EV charging, the state delivered over $79 million in EV charging expansion. That's a lot. And that includes 16 million from MDE, from us, from MEA, as well as 63 million from MDOT and the federal program NEVI. So this scale was only possible because agencies designed those investments together. We were mapping the gaps and sequencing grants so that we can complement, not duplicate all that we were doing in coordination. And so you're going to hear a lot from all the agencies that are here and represented today. But I did want to make it clear that we were not just sitting around at a table drinking coffee. We were actually getting to work. We were developing those KPIs. They're in place now, and now you can see where the progress we're making, but also the progress that we need to do in order to accelerate what we're trying to do. I'll just say, for example, we're still relying on PGM, the grid. We know that we need to pick up the pace when it comes to regional decarbonization. That is an area that we can see. And also with zero emission vehicle adoption, we are still seeing progress, but we have a long way to go. We really do. So as we're looking toward 2026, our charge is really straightforward. We're going to make sure that the agencies stay aligned around the climate plan. We're going to continue to accelerate action where those gaps are largest. And we're going to hold ourselves accountable for results. Point blank, period. That's what we're doing. So I think that's it for me. I know that was actually a lot, but I want to turn it back over to you. And I know, again, that several agencies, including our agency, is going to give you a little more detailed information. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Secretary McElwain. Just I really appreciate your comments about the urgency of which we need to address climate change. As the subcabinet in the report states in its opening sentence, climate change is an existential threat. So appreciate that urgency and the coordinated approach across the whole of government, in addition to those measurable specific indicators of action and progress. So just really, really appreciate your meaningful, serious attention to this work.
Thank you.
Yeah, with that, without further ado, we can dive into some additional updates, and I will pass the microphone to Rachel Lamb, who is a senior climate advisor at MDE, to share highlights.
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity to share a bit more about what MDE is doing specifically to implement our climate plan. And as the Secretary mentioned, really highlight the importance of our role as a convener and a leader in implementing the statewide strategy. I wanted to start by highlighting something the Secretary said, and that is, man, all of these agencies have been working so hard to implement progress under the climate plan. As you can see from this roadmap, since the Moore-Miller administration started in 2023, we've gotten to work in designing a pathway to achieve our goals, publishing our final climate pollution reduction plan, working under the governor's leadership to design individual climate implementation plans by the agency, set up the sub-cabinet, think about ways we can work together at a senior staff level, and then actually publish these plans, publish the first annual sub-cabinet report, and then work consistently in a coordinated fashion over the past year to deliver results, such that we have an opportunity to showcase just this month the second annual report, all of the more detailed agency level reports that all of the agencies that are here with us today and many others that are included in the sub-cabinet have also published, and also improved the way that we're tracking progress, not just on our KPI indicators, which I'll talk more about briefly, but also in the way that we think about how we spend public funds and really maximize every public dollar that we have. Three of the primary vehicles that we'll talk about in terms of reporting, of course, all map up to this one plan. We have 42 policies and programs that span the entire economy across multiple sectors that are guiding and orienting us in our work. Obviously, MDE led the publication of this plan, but it was really important to bridge across sectors and across silos to make sure that we were working collectively towards this goal. And as many of you may have heard, our most recent preliminary greenhouse gas inventory, which is our official mechanism to track and quantify progress against our greenhouse gas reduction goal, says that we are halfway there as of 2023. And it's because of this roadmap that we have more to do to hit our goals. So we've talked a little bit about the publication of the sub-cabinet report, which is really exciting. We released that last week, and there's a press release that hopefully you'll take a look at that we published yesterday. Please dive into that report, take a look at not just what these agencies today are talking about, but all agencies in the governor's sub-cabinet. As I mentioned, also take a look at the individual agency climate reports. Actually, agencies like MDE have been looking across the many different administrations we have, thinking about both the mitigation or the tackling GHG reduction side of our work, as well as building climate resilience, and monitoring, tracking, and improving progress year over year. So we've published those annual reports and want to draw your attention to those again this year if you want to dig in more to see what we're doing. And then also, the law also established a new requirement a couple of years ago, several years ago, to begin tracking public dollars, state dollars specifically, in helping to reduce GHG emissions. We've worked hard, particularly this year with the Department of Budget and Management, to really improve the way that we're tracking that spending. And so that report, which is also forthcoming next week alongside the Climate Commission report, I think is a really great indicator of how much we are doing to invest in that progress, and inviting more conversation with all of you about how we can leverage that to bring in new partnerships and do more together. One thing I wanted to highlight about these agency plans, including ours, is that this year in 2025, when we face such incredible challenges at the federal level, and of course, working hard together to navigate other challenges we're experiencing at the state level, across all of these agency plans, there were 60 high-level priorities that agencies put forward to get to work making progress on. And most of them were directly aligned with those 10 KPIs, which I'll briefly mention. That means that we're directly trying to hold ourselves accountable for aligning our policies, our programs, our activities with these metrics that are sort of the pulse check on how the economy is doing, indicators of how the economy is doing on achieving these GHG reductions. And many of them were focused both on advancing progress in transportation, specifically zero emission vehicles, and working on building decarbonization, two of the largest greenhouse gas sectors that we have in Maryland. Here's just a brief reminder of some of those key performance indicators that you'll see on the left-hand side that we introduced in our 2024 report and are tracking progress against year over year, including this year's report. And we see a lot of progress. We see a lot of effort and work being done, for example, to advance progress on our 5 million trees goal. We also are seeing some of that effort continue to bear fruit on building decarbonization. And we know that many of the big new programs that especially MDE has been putting out and working on are directly meant to continue to drive emission reductions in these sectors. But we also see areas and opportunities for focus and for maybe more creative thinking about how to continue to make progress despite a lot of federal challenges. Those include the pace of the transition to zero emission vehicles, which we are increasing on year over year, but not fast enough. And also thinking about how we continue to do more to generate more clean energy for our grid, which is facing a number of challenges, not only at the federal level, but of course, with our regional grid operator, which the Secretary briefly mentioned. These things are challenges, but they also help us continue to focus our plan of attack and think about ways that we might offer alternative strategies to continue to help the state advance its goals. Now, I briefly want to focus on MDE specific actions. So, as you may recall, part of what we invited every single agency to do under the governor's EO was take a look at the climate pollution reduction plan and make sure that in your own individual agency scope, you're really highlighting those particular priorities or those particular actions that can help us move the needle the fastest. Several of the really important highlights I want to mention for us as an agency are shown here, and they include progress on RGGI. The Secretary is one of the leading officers for the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, that coalition among many states within the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, working to decarbonize the electricity sector through regulating power plant emissions. And we help to secure a new pollution cap that helps decarbonize that sector faster and try to better align with 100% clean energy goals. We also continued to get to work implementing the Building Energy Performance Standards, which were required under the Climate Solutions Now Act and are a really important piece of how we continue to help large building owners move the needle to reduce emissions. For us, that included some of our newest benchmarking processes, standing up new tools, and working a lot with a lot of the building owners and other stakeholders to understand that process and to get to work in submitting that data. Importantly, we also announced progress against two new specific building rules. One, of course, is our Clean Heat Standard, where we proposed and will hopefully soon finalize some of the initial process there to complete benchmarking so we can continue to better understand the data and help design a program that works for Marylanders. And we worked extensively with other states to explore possibilities for our zero emission heating equipment standard. We looked at different model rules, we've learned from other jurisdictions, and are really excited to be leading an extensive stakeholder engagement process in the new year to really better shape implementation. And while these are really important, and I really want to highlight them, it's also important to note that MDE has a lot of other priority actions that we are making progress on relative to the climate pollution reduction plan. You can see sort of the variety of those policies and programs shown here on the screen. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of the things that we've done under them in 2025. So obviously we know we've faced a really challenging year with the rollback of major transportation policies like advanced clean cars, advanced clean trucks, even the recent CAFE standards. But we've really been working through the governor's Advanced Clean Cars and Trucks Working Group to think through alternative strategies. We've been working really hard to think about how we can better support jurisdictions and the requirements to convert their zero emission bus fleets awarding $3 million in grants, working more jurisdictions to overcome problems, benchmark with other states who have similar legislation, and really think critically about how we can continue to make progress in the new year. I'm excited for the working group's report, which will come out here shortly in December. And, we, alongside our other sister agencies, will be continuing to prioritize that in the new year. I also want to mention food waste and food waste diversion. So in 2025, MDE hosted a National Food Waste Prevention Forum, working extensively with the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council and many other local governments to better understand upstream opportunities to divert waste away from landfills, which we know is a significant source of methane, and to benchmark progress on other types of sustainable material management. For example, the governor and the EU ambassador co-hosted an inaugural forum here in Maryland, here in Annapolis, given our leadership on extended producer responsibility to benchmark progress with other states and other jurisdictions and get to work to figure out how we can come alongside local jurisdictions and as well as the producers of those materials to help us make progress. And again, it has a direct GHG reduction benefit while growing jobs and thinking about a circular economy. And finally, we know that MDE has some of the strongest landfill methane regulations in the country. And in 2025, we've worked really closely with a range of scientific partners to better leverage really cool science like remote sensing and other tools to do better to detect leaks and figure out how to support not just leak detection, but remediation. So again, we can find ways to reduce deadly and super pollutant methane pollution while also helping our industry better respond to some of the challenges that they're facing. MDE plays a significant role in convening and leadership. Obviously, we've mentioned that in the context of the climate subcabinet, but we also take that responsibility seriously in the context of staffing the Maryland Commission on Climate Change to working with the U.S. Climate Alliance and many other governors and states across the nation. We're also really serious about enabling and working with local governments to support them. In fact, we stood up a local government support program to help provide additional capacity for access to resources. In 2025, that included helping many local governments consider grants for federal funding and also thinking about now in this new season here over the past year and how we can better add capacity for them to use existing tools like solar siting tools. We also invest in the next generation by hosting many different Climate Corps members, training them, utilizing that expertise to help us grow our work, but also we've had opportunities to be able to leverage some of that expertise to grow our work in our grants and thinking about how we can stand up new programs. And I think it's just really important to highlight the importance of those service year programs. And of course, the work that the Chesapeake Bay Trust does to support the Chesapeake Coastal and Climate Fellows. Finally, we lead a lot of multi-state efforts, and I also just wanted to flag that we're really proud that in 2025, we've been able to get to work implementing two of the largest climate pollution reduction grant programs, including one focused on advancing medium heavy-duty charging infrastructure across the 95 corridor, and working to advance coastal conservation with tree planting, wetland restoration, and more. As we lead implementation of those grants, it's an amazing opportunity to coordinate closely with other agencies like MDOT, DNR, Department of Agriculture, and more, as well as work with many, many other states. So these are things that we continue to do in addition to those very specific policy goals to make progress. And finally, I'll just highlight from an equity and community impact point of view, we're really proud that we were able to update the Maryland Environmental Screening Tool, and that includes not just new data and new approaches to tracking environmental justice, but also thinking about climate vulnerability. So this was one of the new tools required under the Climate Solutions Now Act, and this tool helps us be able to not only identify communities disproportionately affected by climate, but we can use that data with other agencies to track spending in those communities, to think about ways to improve and enhance coordination and engagement with affected communities as a feedback loop so that we can improve the way that our programs function and can make an impact into the future. I've already mentioned some of these, but this is just a highlight for some of the areas of focus that we have together in 2026. We really want to continue making progress on some of the key performance indicator gaps, especially around transportation, continue to implement these really important suite of building decarbonization rules with lots of stakeholder engagement to make sure that they can work effectively. And also, importantly, build new private-public partnerships. We can't do it alone, even with existing state resources. We need to think outside of the box and bring others in. And that's something that we're really prioritizing as an agency in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Really, really appreciate that. I'm seeing some great questions for our panel conversation in the chat pod or in the Q&A pod. And yes, we will be sharing the slides along with the recording after the fact. Thank you again, Rachel, for sharing those updates on behalf of MDE. I'm going to transition over to our friends at the Maryland Energy Administration and pass the microphone over to Jen Aosa, who's the Chief of Staff, as well as Joanna Freeman, the Assistant Division Director for Energy Programs.
So I guess I'm going to turn my audio on. Hi,
go.
everyone. I'm going to try to run my slideshow. Can you all see the slides? Is that in presentation mode? Okay, great. I'm really thrilled to be here. I appreciate the invitation of the Climate Partners. As Laura said, I'm Jen Aosa. I'm the Chief of Staff here with the Maryland Energy Administration, and want to introduce my colleague, Joanna Freeman, who is our Assistant Division Director for our Division of Energy Programs. We just have a few slides today. We're going to do a little bit of a tag team, but I'll get us kicked off. So I wanted to start with just a brief overview of a few of the key climate actions that the Maryland Energy Administration included in our climate pollution reduction plan. And they were things like helping to develop a framework for a clean power standard to meet Governor Moore's goal of 100% clean energy in Maryland. Determining additional actions that may be needed to accelerate solar development, other clean energy deployment in the state. Expanding the Clean Building Hub, which was something that was included in the Climate Solutions Now Act as a provider of technical assistance, as well as developing and providing new building decarbonization incentives through our financial incentives. We also have a role in expanding new EV charging incentives. And then, of course, there are several pots of federal funding that we have been able to take advantage of. And then one of the key sort of ongoing efforts of the agency is sort of getting into the weeds and determining how we can address some of our, not only our energy generation shortfalls, but make sure that as we are increasing generation to meet our needs, we're doing so with clean energy. So getting into sort of our first, I wanted to provide a little bit of information on where we are in a couple of these. So in late 2024, the Maryland Energy Administration developed a report outlining what it would take for Maryland to meet Governor Moore's 100% clean energy goal in the state. And much of that report went into the governor's Energize Maryland Act, which was Senate Bill 434. Unfortunately, I think as many of you may be aware, that bill did not pass. But some provisions that were within that bill were actually rolled into Senate Bill 937, the Next Generation Energy Act, which did pass the General Assembly, and Governor Moore signed into law. And I want to draw specific attention to the nuclear provisions that were a part of that act, because as many of you know, nuclear is currently the largest clean generation in state that we have. And so the Next Generation Energy Act provides some really important procurement mechanisms to help us develop additional nuclear technologies. And that work is moving forward at the Public Service Commission. The other thing that we've been focusing on, and in fact, quite a bit more since some of the federal legislative activity has made solar deployment a little more challenging. We've seen surging demand basically since the federal One Big Beautiful bill was passed in July 25, because that bill ends quite a few of the federal tax incentives for residential and commercial solar deployment. There's a bit of uncertainty exactly how some of these tax provisions are going to impact solar development, but we're working pretty closely with the solar industry to try to determine where those impacts are most likely to be felt. But we are continuing to fund solar deployment in community solar, residential solar, and then through funding for the solar app deployment. And we're really pleased to report that in FY25, we provided grants to 2 additional jurisdictions so that when they begin implementing, roughly 40% of Maryland's population is going to be within a jurisdiction that is using solar app to help with solar deployment. So I will turn the next slide over to, oops, hang on a second, I went too far, to my colleague, Joanna.
Hello, everyone. Just to continue what Jen was talking about, some of the successes and challenges that we've seen include, in partnership with MDE, running our Clean Building Hub, which helps focus on the Maryland BEPS compliance. We are pleased that we are soon to be launching an RFP and bid process through MES for technical assistance to provide BEPS-sized buildings with the TA that they need to move their projects forward. We'll be providing funding for both benchmarking assistance as well as the future construction needs that some of these buildings really do need to meet their goals. On top of that, our internal funding for our in-house programs really have been focusing on sector by sector needs, focusing on decarbonization. We have commercial and community incentives available for both energy efficiency and electrification that have above and beyond been proven to be successful. Some of the other incentives Jen mentioned a little bit earlier on EVSC. We are really focusing those incentives on the community and making sure that we can touch both multifamily and community serving groups. We have overwhelming interest. Last year we had over $4 million in request, and we're seeing an additional $10 million this year that people are above and beyond wanting to get out in their community and focus on those electric vehicle supply equipment needs for their communities. Some of the challenges, it's no surprise to anyone. We're still waiting to hear from DOE on our IRA rebates. Our awards still remain conditional. We keep, asking, we're plugging along. We're going to have our internal funding programs be here to support the community as we can until we hear back from DOE.
Great. So I wanted to touch a little bit on, how MEA is focused on equitable outcomes. And I like to share that many of our programs, most, in fact, are income limited and or specifically focused into communities that are overburdened. A couple of examples I've placed on the screen here. In FY26, so the current fiscal year, our residential energy equity program is focusing more than $20 million, both on energy efficiency and solar energy that is serving low to moderate income, single family and multifamily residential buildings. This is up from fiscal year 25, where we had about $11 million that we deployed for our energy equity programs. We're also in 26 continuing our community solar low to moderate income power purchase agreement grant program. And while that's a mouthful, what this is basically doing is helping to buy down the costs of community solar to serve low to moderate income residents through community solar. In FY26, we have also included an area of opportunity. Around $12 million for this program is going to be targeted to community solar projects on landfills and brownfield sites that benefit low-income residents in Maryland. And then finally, many of you helped advocate for the Maryland Solar Access Program, which is a statutory program that we stood up as of January 1st of this year. And that provides grants on a per kilowatt basis up to $7,500 for income qualified single family homes in Maryland. And so again, we've seen unprecedented interest in our residential solar assistance programs this year. And these are a few ways that we're trying to serve low to moderate income Marylanders.
Just looking ahead, this is a very busy fiscal year for us. We're looking at awarding over $200 million in grants, including $64 million we have budgeted for our local government program, the Local Government Energy Modernization Program. I'm thrilled to announce that program closed last week with overwhelming support. So the team is actively reviewing those applications. And we're going to be continuing this momentum into fiscal 27 with the continued focus on that LMI population, overburdened communities, a heavy emphasis on affordability to all Marylanders. That being said, it's likely we've seen success with consolidating our programs into sector-based designs just to make it easier for our applicants, and we're looking to continue that momentum next year. And then the same question over and over again, we're just going to sit here and hopefully wait to see our IRA rebate program be approved here in Maryland so we can roll that out for everyone.
And with that, I will turn it back over to Laura. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jen and Joanna. Wanted to address one question in the chat pod. LMI is low and moderate income, so definitely addressing folks who should be benefiting from some of the equitable climate solutions that are being offered. Jen and Joanna want to ask one clarifying question that I saw come through the chat pod on BEPS. Montgomery County has its own building energy performance standards. Will building owners in Montgomery County be eligible for technical assistance through the Maryland Energy Administration?
Yes, of course.
Yes, wonderful. And with that, we will transition over to our next speaker. That is Nicola Tran, the Director of Housing and Building Energy Programs at the Department of Housing and Community Development. So Nicola, take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for having us here today. As some of you might know, DHCD has been implementing energy efficiency programs that support the state's greenhouse gas reduction efforts and address climate change for decades. These programs specifically work in the low income and affordable housing space, and to 95% support disadvantaged communities. Can you all still see my slides? Because I don't see them anymore.
Yeah, we can see them, Nicola.
Okay, all right, so maybe there's some mirroring going on. However, DHCD is more than just the housing and building energy programs. The agency also operates more than 40 other programs that are related to housing and community development, and a little bit more in the traditional sense. Many of those programs fund or support construction projects, and through those construction projects, DHCD is in a really unique position to have the opportunity to directly influence the methods, the materials, and codes used in a building sector that can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that is what DHCD has focused on in the climate implementation plan, to really expand climate reduction efforts beyond these dedicated energy programs. And those efforts have been outlined in our climate implementation program. The 6 actions that DHCD is working towards is to promote the application of efficient building codes in construction projects, to promote the switch to clean fuels in construction projects, to promote the inclusion of renewable energy systems in construction projects, to include existing greenhouse gas resources into the funding stacks for non-climate related construction projects, to review our own building operation protocols and the setup of our agency locations, and connect program applicants that do not come in through construction projects with existing resources for greenhouse gas savings. And one part that has been a challenge for us in our operations is that DHCD operates more than 40 programs that are related to housing and community development. Not all of them fund construction and have the opportunity to influence building decisions. But those that do deal with construction, each of those programs is subject to very specific funding source requirements. So with our extensive portfolio of programs and all the policies that are connected to each of those programs, DHCD is currently undergoing a really extensive effort to examine each program separately and individually with all program managers to implement program-specific climate actions that are in compliance with each of those programs' funding sources and overseeing regulators. And then one concern that has been brought up a few times is that sometimes the goal of producing climate-friendly construction can conflict with building a lot of affordable housing structures fast and at a low cost. And some stakeholders see those two goals sometimes at odds, where climate-friendly building practices may be more expensive than traditional building practices. Of course, others will argue that over the long term, the operational savings in those climate-friendly constructions will make up for that, but there has been that concern of upfront cost. And then some of the successes in this process of expanding our climate efforts across the agencies have been that the production in our existing energy programs has doubled over the last 2 years. So the influx of additional funding for our energy programs has borne some fruit, and production is on an upward trajectory to bring more energy savings out into the field. One of the other successes that we highlighted in our climate plan is that we were able to loop all other divisions within DHCD into the climate plan. This is no longer just an effort of the energy programs alone, but we established a network of climate liaisons in all of our different divisions across the building. And these climate liaisons will continue to meet on a quarterly basis to meet and to define how the different divisions can advance the climate implementation plan with program-specific actions. And then what we have found in those meetings is that really there are a lot of opportunities that exist to make changes to existing and traditional construction programs, even within the existing program structure. So we've already been able to make some small changes within some programs within the existing program structure with no additional funding or regulatory changes needed. Regarding equity and community impact, I would like to highlight that our energy efficiency and our energy programs, they do focus 95% of their funding and work towards the low income and affordable housing community. And the majority of other programs throughout DHCD also implement this comprehensive approach where they're now looking to include the energy efficiency with sustainable construction practices, renewable energy adoption, and focusing on community engagement to bring these benefits out to the communities. All divisions within DHCD partner heavily with community-based organizations that work directly with the underserved populations and help connect the programs to the communities and bring those benefits out into the field. DHCD will continue to target the funding and program activities in underserved communities, and all of those activities are guided by DHCD's newly established Just Communities Division, which was funded by, it was implemented through legislation and went active this year. And the Just Communities Division is really an overarching framework for all that is happening in the built environment in Maryland, with the goal to address longstanding racial, economic, and environmental inequities, improve access to housing, stabilize neighborhoods, promoting business development, and giving residents of historically marginalized communities a better shot at equity, homeownership, safety, and opportunity. So what's ahead for us for 2026 is to work on two specific priorities from our climate implementation plan that the Secretary has determined as our near to midterm efforts. And one of them is to strengthen or establish partnerships with organizations that offer greenhouse gas incentive programs to collaborate with on construction projects. So while we have our own construction programs, not all programs that DHCDs implement have the opportunity to make a direct impact on constructions. We also have consumer-facing programs and business-facing programs for which we currently don't have any direct energy funding or energy incentives available. So for those programs, we are trying to connect those programs and the participants in those programs with any other existing greenhouse gas resources that exist in the state. And we have been working with, in collaboration with MEA and MDE, as well as the utility programs and any other incentive programs that exist in the state, and are working with our programs to connect those participants to any existing funding that exists outside of DHCD. Some of our programs have already committed to connecting their participants to those outside greenhouse gas savings programs going forward. And for that purpose, we are currently developing comprehensive info sheets that will be given to all of those program participants, so that, for example, our Neighborhood Business Works division can connect their commercial participants to any commercially available energy or greenhouse gas programs, or the Maryland Mortgage Program will connect the single family consumers with any programs that are available to them outside of what we offer. And then the second step that we are working on, and this is by far more challenging, is to find ways to reduce or eliminate funding of fossil fuel systems in specifically new construction. In total, as I mentioned, DHCD operates more than 40 programs that are related to construction, and we are looking at each of those programs specifically, what they can do currently within their regulations to reduce the construction of fossil fuel equipment currently, and what they can do and change in their regulations going forward to ensure that fossil fuel projects are no longer incentivized going forward. The outcomes vary greatly by program and range among outcomes such as some programs are able to implement a new policy that will straight out no longer fund fossil fuel equipment. Other programs are not able to prohibit it at the moment, but they are able to provide higher incentives or lower loan rates for projects that do not include fossil fuel equipment. And other programs may be able to prioritize applications that don't include fossil fuel equipment. So there's going to be quite a range here depending on the program, but each of the program is looking what they can do within current constraints and what additional steps we can take to reduce the implementation of new fossil fuel equipment out there. And lastly, I would like to offer two specific opportunities for public engagement. I know a lot of people in this group and in this audience might be interested in joining these efforts. Currently, there's the hot phase of the Empower Low Income Working Group that is preparing for the next Empower program cycle starting in 2027. The group will meet relatively regularly, almost every month for the next half year or so. It's a pretty large group of various stakeholders that help shape the direction and delivery of the DHCD's Empower Limited Income Energy Efficiency Program. And I listed the email address of my deputy director here, who you can email if you'd like to participate in those meetings. And then the second one is the input sessions for the Qualified Allocation Plan and Multifamily Rental Financing Program Guide. Every year, the Multifamily Rental Program Group will offer the opportunity to provide input on requirements for multifamily rental housing construction. And I provided a link. It should work, I think, when the slides are provided, to just click on it and sign up for notices to be looped into that process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. And yes, we will share these slides, as we've said, after the fact, so folks can access this information and make sure that they engage with DHCD. I have one clarifying question that I'd like to ask you before we transition to our last presenter. Over 40 housing and community development programs is quite a lot. We have a question. Is there any effort to streamline that body of work for your department and make things a little simpler?
Yes, as much as we can. We do like to do that. But you know, these are 40 programs governed, some of them by the federal government through multiple different agencies. Some of them are state funded, some of them are privately funded. So each time you know, one of these funders issues money for a program, it typically comes with strings attached. So we are looking into what we can do now with the existing strings, but then also working towards, you know, streamlining that and kind of getting them all a little bit more on the same page going forward. And when there is an opportunity to update regulations or policies or requirements, to bring them all together a little bit more. But that will be an ongoing process.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Yeah, and I appreciate what an effort that must be in order to coordinate amongst the various funders, various program goals. So it's really appreciate that. All right, last but certainly not least, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Darren Lovas from the Maryland Department of Transportation. Darren is the Chief of Environment and Sustainable Transportation. So looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
All right, thanks very much. Can you see it? Yes?
Yep, I can see them now.
Okay, let me see if I can switch it to there. That's even bigger. So, all right. So, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Laura. So, and thanks for having me on. I'm going to quickly walk through a status update of some of what we've been doing as part of our climate strategy. First of all, I'm basing this update on the June 2024 Climate Executive Order signed by Governor Moore, which specified statewide and an all-of-agency approach where we need to head in terms of tackling climate change, and actually called out MDOT for some specific tasks. And that's what's listed here. I'm not going to read it out to you. The deck should be available to you afterwards. So these are simply what MDOT's on the hook for, according to the executive order from last year. And this is our assessment of how we're doing in terms of implementing these key pieces. So first of all, we are in the midst of developing our zero emission vehicle infrastructure plan. We are in the midst of a pilot effort to evaluate greenhouse gas impacts from our consolidated transportation program. And if people aren't familiar with this is the biggest and most important programming document we have here at the Maryland Department of Transportation. Like other transportation agencies, our work roughly happens at 3 levels. At the project level, which people are mostly familiar with, which is almost literally where the rubber hits the road in terms of effects we have on Maryland and our landscape and communities. And then the program level is the next level up. And that's actually, these are budget documents that determine where money is going to go to build certain projects. And then above that is our long-term plan, which is more visionary and higher level. All right, so moving on. We're also asked to implement projects that reduce greenhouse gases in VMT, and that's what we're doing right now. That's kind of our bread and butter daily business. Developing targets for greenhouse gases in VMT. This has gotten a little tougher given what's happening with federal uncertainty and federal rollbacks, which I'll go into in a second. And then we have a carbon reduction strategy, which we put together pursuant to federal law to accompany the carbon reduction program, which we're also making progress on. So first of all, ZVIP, the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Plan. This is meant to be the roadmap for electrification of the vehicle fleet moving forward. And it's about charging infrastructure. It's about the actual percentage of the fleet that's made up of electric vehicles. And it's about what agencies, including MDOT, can do to continue advancing electrification. We anticipate releasing this plan in the first quarter of next year. And this will be a key guiding document moving forward. And it's become a little tougher to write it because of uncertainty, but that's exactly why it's as important as ever right now. We've already released a piece of it. Our suitability tool is available now. And what this tool does is determine where logical sites are in terms of EV charging needs. So this helps to guide filling in deserts and gaps in terms of our statewide charging network. And that's not just in terms of corridors, but it's also in terms of neighborhood charging as well as workplace charging. So I advise you to take a look at this. There's an introductory video that explains how to use it, and it's meant to be used widely as a tool to determine where good sites are for additional charging infrastructure. Within the Consolidated Transportation Program, the Cornerstone Program is a federal one, actually, under the infrastructure law, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. Maryland receives $63 million over the 5 years of the infrastructure law to build out charging first along 23 designated alternative fuel corridors, which is basically highways crisscrossing Maryland. And then we can pivot to investing in community charging. And the good news is, just this last quarter of this year, we've opened up our first 3 stations. NEVI stations are direct current fast charging stations, so they're pretty powerful and easy to charge at, and the designs are top notch, and they're required to be up 97% of the time. And actually this morning we had a nice event to do a ribbon cutting for our latest one that's opened, which is that first one at a pilot travel center in I'm sorry, the last one, also a pilot travel center, but in Cecil County. So stay tuned. There should be some good coverage of that, especially on social media. All right. Transit investments are core to our climate strategy, and MDOT, the Department of Transportation, has a mass transit administration under our umbrella, and we also contribute to the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. And we are investing a lot of money in the Consolidated Transportation Program. These are some investments. So the current program, the one that's operative now, spans 2025 to 2030. The one that will be ratified legislatively next session, and that has been toured across all our 23 counties and pretty well introduced, is the one spanning 2026 to 2031. And as you can see, that new CTP contains a lot of investment, not just in new transit service, but existing modernization of existing services. So we're really committed to this, both capital investments in transit and operating investments in transit as part of our climate strategy. The other thing we're committed to is transit-oriented development. This is something that is a real problem in Maryland, actually. Actually, this is the solution to the real problem, which is underutilized land around transit stops. MARC stations, light rail stations in Baltimore, and metro stations in the DC area especially tend to be seas of parking, which is not the best value or most valuable use of that land. Instead, we are working with private sector partners, with local partners, to advance transit-oriented development around an increasing number of stations. I'm the Chief of Environment and Sustainable Transportation. We have a Chief of TOD here in the Secretary's office, which shows how committed we are to this. We're also committed to active transportation. In fact, this Consolidated Transportation Program invests more dollars, more than $500 million in active transportation than any previous in history. And that boils down to a bunch of initiatives that we have launched. The Pedestrian Safety Action Plan. We have a new Complete Streets policy that we're implementing. We have what are called Complete Streets Quick Builds. These are inexpensive projects that allow us to quickly build safety countermeasures like bollards for protected bike lanes, speed humps and speed bumps, and other improvements. And then we can measure their effectiveness, and that helps us to determine which ones we want to implement permanently, and also builds community support for them, because you end up, interestingly, with increased safety, but without sacrificing traffic flow. So people realize how common sense these improvements are. In terms of the target setting, there are targets in place, but the challenge is that they don't take into account the remarkable and seismic changes to the federal landscape, especially, which is going to make achieving them more difficult. So this is something we have to reckon with, actually, in Maryland, is the feasibility of the targets that we've committed to, and what we do about different scenarios for achieving them. In terms of the carbon reduction strategy, this is also in the federal infrastructure law, and we've been implementing this competitively. And this, as you can see, there's a whole bunch of investments that are eligible for this money. And actually, a friend who was a former city councilman from Mount Rainier sent a note last night thanking MDOT for investments in an electric garbage truck that they're going to deploy for use in Mount Rainier, which is great, and that's exactly the kind of investment that this program is meant for. In terms of equity and community impact, this is something MDOT is deeply committed to, and it shines through in terms of our commitment to public transportation, both capital and operating investments in active transportation projects. And the reason these are important is because disadvantaged communities rely on public transportation disproportionately, and those who are injured or killed in crashes because they're vulnerable road users, walking or biking or rolling, are also disproportionately members of disadvantaged communities. So our other investments help to reduce criteria air pollution, which also burdens disadvantaged communities disproportionately. So, and of course, procedurally, we're also committed to equity in terms of feedback and involvement in design and deployment of our projects across the state. And then the last slide, I know I might be running a little long on time, so feel free to take a look at these after I'm done. These are the strategies that we're looking at for 2026. and there's a whole slew of them, and we're going to persevere in terms of moving forward with them in spite of, again, federal headwinds. So that's what I have.
Thank you very much, Darren. Really, really appreciate that. Just have one question for you coming from the chat. This is also a little bit for DHCD as well. So, Nicola, if you have a response, invite you to share that as well. But essentially, the question is getting at this interrelated challenge of decreasing vehicle miles traveled and how transit-oriented development requires probably MDOT and DHCD to be working together. So would just appreciate if you could briefly speak to how MDOT and DHCD are collaborating on transit-oriented development.
Yeah, Nicola, I don't know if you can talk to that.
I know that DHCD does have a working group with MDOT, but I'm not personally on it, so I don't have any more details than that, other than that there are conversations. I don't know if you're a little bit more involved in it.
Yeah, here's the challenge, Laura, is that at the Secretary's office, our team is big enough that David Zayden, the Chief of Transit-Oriented Development, and his team work on a daily basis with Secretary Day and their counterparts at DHCD. So we work very closely, and our TOD agenda hopefully will help address the state's housing agenda in collaboration with DHCD, especially on the affordable housing front. So it's kind of funny, actually. Nicola and I used to work together in the past on improving the energy efficiency of affordable housing. But strangely now, we actually don't work with each other directly, but her counterparts work with my counterparts really closely in terms of including housing in TOD especially.
Yeah, thank you very much, Darren and Nicola. I think that just really re-emphasizes how many different public servants, state leaders are really working collaboratively across the state government in order to address climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions across a variety of sectors. So with that, that's the last question you'll hear from me for today, but I will pass the microphone over to two of our Climate Partners Steering Committee members who will introduce themselves and help moderate our panel discussion.
Thanks so much, Laura, and thanks to our speakers and the agencies represented here today. And thank you all of you for tuning in. Brian and I were taking lots of notes on your questions, so hope to incorporate them into some of the ones we already had planned, and then we'll get to as many as we can in the remainder of our time. But I'm Rebecca Rear. I am the Director of Climate Policy and Justice at the Maryland League of Conservation Voters. I'm happy to be here as part of the Q&A panel.
My name is Brian Dunning. I'm a Senior Policy Analyst at the Center for Progressive Reform. I'd just like to echo Rebecca's thanks to the presenters and the agencies for showing up, and for everyone, all of the climate partners in attendance. It's going to take all of us to solve this. So I'm so happy we're all here today. I know we're running a touch behind time, so just jumping right into questions. Secretary McElwain at the outset of this webinar noted that the changing federal situation has understandably increased the challenge of the task at hand, but Maryland is looking to move at speed to solve the climate crisis. Can you discuss briefly, and I know that this has been touched on in all of your presentations, but strategies undertaken by your agency, and these include both in conjunction or coordination with, say, the Attorney General to push back on federal changes, or more broadly to flexibly respond to the challenge at hand. For instance, we had a great question from the chat focusing on building private and public partnerships and working with philanthropic groups in the state to tackle areas where we're less on track to meet state goals. I'd love to hear from all the panelists on this, but just to start, if the Department of Transportation would be willing to take it.
So just to understand this, the question is how we're adjusting to and innovating in spite of the federal headwinds to keep moving forward.
I think innovation, thinking outside the box.
Yeah. So, wow, this is the I guess the first thing I mentioned, just because we were just talking about it, we are working with the private sector and with local partners on transit-oriented development, and actually, for the first time, actually getting that moving at transit stops across Maryland, right? Which is a long-term part of our any solid climate strategy. We have been working with the AG's office to help with litigation. In fact, we were one of 12 states that joined a lawsuit to basically compel the Department of Transportation to allow us to continue implementing NEVI, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. And we are actively in conversation with the AG's office about other litigation opportunities. And having worked, my previous job was with the Natural Resources Defense Council, where I was for a long time. I'm totally comfortable with litigation. I also realize it's sort of a last resort. So ideally, we can get things resolved, but sometimes you have to resort to litigation. In fact, I think we're going to have to do quite a bit more of that during the remainder of this president's term. In terms of other innovative work that we're doing, I mean, we are working as closely as possible with local partners, especially on active transportation. And I've heard a lot of feedback that that's refreshing in terms of MDOT's approach to those types of projects and our commitment to those types of projects and to the safety of vulnerable road users and to building out actual bicyclists and pedestrian infrastructure as a serious modal alternative, which is part of our climate plan, our climate strategy. Yeah, I'll confess though, the other thing I'm realizing is while innovation and adjustments are key given the headwinds, for us, it's also a matter of capitalizing on the substantial assets and the substantial budget we possess. The Consolidated Transportation Program, just to give people an idea, is the current one spanning 25 through 30 is a $21.2 billion investment program. We have more than 100 buildings across the state. We have thousands of miles of roadways across the state, and we have a lot of transit infrastructure too. So there is a lot we can do, even just as MDOT, to make better leverage our assets and to make good use of our existing budget in order to make sure that we're continuing to make progress on our climate strategy. So, yeah, so I guess that's what I'd say. So we are innovating, but we're also really pushing to make sure that we use the substantial tools we have as one of the larger state agencies in Maryland to continue making progress.
Nicola.
And I would just like to add one more item to that, just because all of the agencies that are on this call today have been taking interagency coordination to a level that hasn't existed in the state like this before. And it doesn't sound very innovative, but the level to which the interagency coordination has risen over the last year or two, I think it really, to Darren's point, maximizes the use of the existing resources in the most efficient way. That we are coordinating resources amongst each other. We're coordinating pipelines amongst each other. We are talking about funding gaps with each other so that we can help each other out, identify where is the funding gap, where does the program already exist, to reduce doubling up on efforts and really using the existing infrastructure that each agency has to their maximum.
Open question to either MEA or MDE on the same as well.
So I'm happy to share. The Maryland Energy Administration, I think, as you all know, is very fortunate as one of the state energy offices. Every state has a state energy office. We are one of the few that is largely funded through non-federal dollars. And so in much the same way that Darren suggested, we are working to deploy our funding in the most efficient and effective way that we possibly can. I think everybody who has picked up a newspaper knows that this federal administration has been openly antagonistic toward clean energy, specifically solar and wind. So we have been working in concert with the Office of the Attorney General to push back on some of the federal administration's activities in that regard. And I'm really pleased to report that we just saw a victory, I believe it was in Massachusetts, relative to offshore wind and things that the administration is trying to do. So we are actively participating as we can and helping to build the case so that Maryland can continue to deploy our resources both for wind and for solar. And then we're going to continue deploying our resources to targeted communities and to help those who are experiencing maybe outsized energy burdens.
Thank you. And for MDE, Rachel, if you mentioned specifically in your presentation public-private partnerships, and perhaps if you could elaborate a bit more on that and potentially how philanthropy in Maryland could also assist in tackling these goals.
I think that's very important, and I'm glad that you picked up on that bullet point from the presentation. We spent an incredible amount of effort over the last couple of years trying to capture as much federal funding as we could. As we know, this past year, we've faced incredible challenges and still have had some successes on holding on to some really important funds. But we know we need to continue to be more creative and bringing others in to help us. I think one of the things I heard mentioned earlier is how important the messaging is around the cost effectiveness and the affordability that many climate solutions can provide. And I think one of the ways we can continue to partner with philanthropy and other nonprofit partners is how can we continue to spread that message to help residents, for example, understand their options, understand the benefits, help point them to programs that can really help them reduce their upfront costs. We need more messengers to help us do that more effectively and to really think critically about how we can improve the communication of these benefits. I'm thinking about that in terms of EVs, of weatherization, of and taking advantage of community solar. There's a lot of programs that are out there, even despite all that we're facing. And more support on communication and engagement, I think, is one of the ways that we can really help people understand how they can save money. As we are continuing to find ways to design the programs and to design the policies to do more to eliminate those barriers as well. So it's both. And I think more partnership on that would be really helpful, particularly around those two key performance indicators that I talked about, including clean energy development and zero emission vehicles. And we all know that there's a lot of opportunity for creative financing. You know, we have institutions like the Green Bank and others that can help us sort of think outside the box, outside of traditional grant programs. The more that we can harness that expertise and align there, I think that also allows us to be more creative in our deployment and leverage private funds as well. I know that's something we're thinking about at MDE, how we can work with our sister agencies here and institutions like the Green Bank to do more.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that actually leads really well into a question we had about, sort of we started with the two elephants in the room. One is the federal, what's going on federally, and then the other, I know you know this is common, is the budget, right? And then I think so that was a great segue into this question, because we all know you're among friends here, right? Like, we know that the climate investments have an incredibly high return on investment. There may be an upfront cost, but when we look down the road, not just in energy costs, energy stability, energy affordability, but health reductions in air pollution have a direct result in when we're talking about reducing asthma hospitalizations. and preventing the spread of vector-borne illness, which we're seeing more frequently in hotter temperatures. You all know my background's public health. I can't help it. But so we know this, right? So how are we continuing to make that case? When the budget is tight, what we want to hear from all of you about how your agencies are navigating that tension between a really difficult budget year, billions of dollars from the federal government that have been revoked. And so how are your agencies looking to preserve funding that exists? We got a good question in the chat about the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, using those funds for what they're meant to be used for. And then creating new sources of funding. I think green banks are a great example, and the state actually has 3 of them. And then, but also, sources, we got a good question in the chat about cap and invest, which is a explicit recommendation in the climate pollution reduction plan, and could be a brand new source of funding. So just want to hear from each of you about preserving existing funds, creating new sources of funding, and let's continue the budget conversation. And since SEEF was mentioned, I'll hand it over to MEA first, I guess.
Thank you for the question. I know that it is something that has been on everyone's minds. And there's no doubt that this is a special fund that was created for a variety of purposes related to climate action. And MEA is really doing all that we can to put that money toward the uses that are dictated by the statute. And we're going to continue to do that. Now, I know that there have been, last year, there were diversions that the legislature made from the SEEF. The one thing that maybe wasn't acknowledged, though, is that MEA still was fully funded, and in fact, an additional $100 million above our baseline budget was allocated for climate-related initiatives. So 50 million of that went directly to MDOT. We've been working collaboratively with MDOT to deploy solar on state lands, and another 50 came to MEA, and we are deploying that directly to local governments through our local government energy modernization program. So while I understand the consternation around taking money from a dedicated fund, I will say, we can only spend what we are appropriated, and our appropriations have been level or have increased slightly. And so in my view, that is a positive in an otherwise very challenging budget climate. Especially, given what we're seeing from the federal government as well. So it's not all doom and gloom. And I do think that as long as we are receiving the proceeds from the RGGI quarterly auctions, we just had another record auction, I believe, last week. And the alternative compliance payments, we are going to continue to see a robust SEEF that we are going to be able to continue to utilize for climate mitigation and resilience work.
I do want to add on something. Yes, perhaps we will see more with the alternative compliance fee, but that's also taking us backwards. The higher that budget is, that means we're that much not close to the goals that we're trying to meet in Maryland. So it's a good thing, but it's not a good thing at all. I will say, I think we all know that the climate bill, to do all the things that we need to do, if you recall what's in the climate pollution reduction plan, it's a lot of money, and we don't have it. Not $1 billion a year to devote to it, but we are fortunate enough to have RGGI, which is what you were just talking about. We do have RGGI, which is a cap and invest program. It's bringing in a lot of money. we are trying to figure out how can we be ourselves be innovative and strategic and find ways uh, to offset the gap in terms of funding. And that's where we need partners. We need private partners. We need to do more. We need to get outside of our buildings, work with foundations, make the case that we need partnerships. We need to put a little on the table to get more. We had talked about bonds before. You know, how can we leverage bonds? But the thing about that is you leverage, that's like a loan. So what are we actually leveraging the bond against, right? And there are some sources, but these are just, you know, areas in which this is a hard area. It's tough. And we're still thinking about it and trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we bring in more money in Maryland, considering the political landscape that we find ourselves in? So all these decisions, they have to be strategic. We can't just jump out there and increase fees. We got to think about it first and make sure it's appropriate and it's right for the moment and for Maryland.
Nicola or Darren, anything before we move on to the next question?
I think one thing I would like to add is one thing that we've been working on over the past years is to really maximize the existing funding that we have and rework the existing funding sources as much as possible. So, for example, we used to have a traditional home repair program that funds home repairs, and we have reworked that program to specifically specialize on critical repairs that are needed in order to weatherize homes, because that was one of the funding gaps that held back a lot of customers from accessing energy efficiency retrofits, is the critical repairs needed in their home. So we, instead of spending that money on traditional repairs, it's now spent entirely on critical repairs needed to get a home weatherized. Similarly, in our coordination with our multifamily rental programs, instead of the rental programs going in and replacing a gas furnace with a gas furnace, they're now kicking it over to our energy programs and are asking, hey, do you have funding for electrification for this project, so we don't have to go in 10 years and then replace the gas furnace with a heat pump? Let's do it now wherever we can. So, again, that goes back to coordination and really maximize the funding that does exist.
So, yeah, I guess all I'd add is in terms of our federal funding, we want to protect and secure that as much as possible, and to spend it as quickly as possible. That's something we're focusing on. And in transportation, it's called obligation. We want to obligate funding as quickly as possible, which ensures that it can't be clawed back by the feds. And again, litigation can help us to protect federal funding that we are due under the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And the only other thing I'd add is state partnerships across agencies is key. Thanks, Jen, for mentioning our partnership on solar, which is a win-win because there's this funding that MEA has to invest, and we have, again, these assets across the state, including park and rides, an airport, a port, transit stops that can host solar. And that can contribute, therefore, to the state's RPS and climate goals. And so that kind of creative arrangement is helpful as well.
Yeah, Secretary McElwain.
Hi, I just wanted to bring up one other issue. Actually, Rachel, if you can talk about the climate assessment that we really tried to get done, and I think we did get funding to do an assessment to see how all of these changes are actually impacting us meeting our climate goals. And it also, I believe it's looking at funding as well, right? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's important.
Yeah. So, as the Secretary mentioned, we've had a real strong focus on two things. One, understanding the real impact of these federal rollbacks on the state and progress. We've talked quite a bit about it. this past year with the Climate Commission and are continuing to work with our university partners to get a real strong targeted assessment of what the greenhouse gas impact is in Maryland. So we're continuing to work on that. We look forward to some results of that assessment in the new year. In parallel, when the secretary says we want more private-public partnerships, she means it, and that means trying to be targeted in the strategy. So what's on the table now? Where are the assets currently? Where are the gaps? And then how can we invite, because I appreciate this question, like where are the avenues for partnership? Where can we invite others to help us? So we've been thinking about through how to do a climate financing strategy for the state that helps bring in some of those external levers that we can better pull to really make progress. And so we were able to learn from some other states that have done something similar and get going on mapping out what that kind of strategy would be, and are launching some work on that this month, actually. So we are doing that in conversation with other states. We're hoping to have some conversations, of course, with our green banks and other existing institutions about that. But part of the goal of that is to get real specific and real targeted about how we can leverage external resourcing based on what the state is already investing to do more. And that's a real tangible, there's some real tangible outcomes related to that, and that work's ongoing throughout 2026. So I think that's something we hopefully will be able to talk about maybe at the April forum, but at least as part of our discussions together next year.
So next question for the group. And Rachel, you actually teed this up amazingly in responding to the questions about public-private partnerships and philanthropy. But it's highlighting the importance of affordability for all of this. Affordability is a huge issue across the board right now, both in Maryland, the East Coast, nationally. And we're really blessed, in my opinion, that we live in a time now where we can talk about climate plans, clean energy, et cetera, and in a way that this is actually something that saves people money. Whether it's weatherization, electrification, et cetera, there is a tangible benefit to the community, to Marylanders generally. And so, Rachel, I know you started this, and so if you want to add more, you can certainly start on it, or if someone else wants to take the lead here. But I'd like to hear kind of how are your agencies selling the public on this? That like this is a great thing, not just for the climate, but for the bottom line, and also to the extent that you're engaged in like true cost accounting, as Rachel discussed. I'm sorry, not as Rebecca discussed. The health impacts are quite intense, and there's both health savings and economic savings from that. Jeroen, go ahead.
Yeah, so not sure about the second piece, but for the first piece, I definitely have thoughts on that. So first of all, we have a communications shop here. Other agencies do as well, and we work our best to create a public-facing informational materials that help to make the case and help to showcase the benefits of all these investments so they remain popular. And since there are so many advocates on the line, and since I am a former advocate, I can say that is a role that is even better suited to advocates, right? That's part of the outside game, if you will, for continuing to make advances. And that's something that NGO partners are very, very good at focusing on. And so basically helping to build demand and awareness for commitment to strong policies and implementation of them, and awareness of the threats that we can counter with those tools and the benefits, the variety of benefits, economic and health and otherwise, that we can reap from staying the course.
Yeah, I would just note real quickly that when we publish the climate plan, as you might recall from the law, the requirement is to publish a plan that not only hits the goals, but delivers net economic benefit for Maryland and delivers human health benefits. So by doing this work together and implementing the programs and the policies, we actually can achieve really important outcomes, including the ones you were talking about, Rebecca, including public health benefits, including new jobs, including GDP growth. And I think the challenge is those are really big numbers, and sometimes they can be really hard for people to relate to on their day-to-day life. And so I think the opportunity we have together is to say, there are real benefits for all of Marylanders when we get, come together and get to work implementing this. When we think about buildings, like how do we make it the communications really practical and really targeted for the people whose furnace just went out and they have to figure out what to do. They're not thinking about the climate plan and the fact that the climate delivering on the climate plan, saves them money. It's that real hard choice of what do I have to do to provide, to turn on the heat in the middle of winter. So the more that we can work with all of you to think about effective communication strategies to really imagine what families are experiencing, and to help communicate the benefits up front, I think are really important. And we've been doing some of that in new partnerships. We have some new partnerships to do some marketing and engagement, particularly on electric vehicles. As I mentioned, the real cost saving factor related to EVs, real tools that help you see what incentives or charging infrastructure is available where you live, help you evaluate different models, figure out what kind of the gas savings would be, those kinds of tools that again make it really easy to understand, and media that people can engage with that's like makes sense from their day-to-day commutes or their day-to-day experience is really valuable. So we are trying to do some of that and would welcome more partnership with all of you to help us do that better.
And if I could just, go ahead, Nicola.
Thank you. Just one thing I will add to that, what we have found is that it really helps is to translate all the benefits into hard numbers, because, soft statements such as this will reduce your health costs or this will reduce your maintenance costs. If that doesn't translate into what does this mean on my monthly bottom line, and how much I'm paying for utility bills or how much you want me, to pay for this retrofit, numbers need to compare to numbers. So that's one of the projects that we've been working on recently is just to translate all of those non-energy benefits or those non-number benefits into numbers, specifically on the landlord side. This age-old dilemma of landlords not wanting to make upgrades to the home because the utility savings go to the tenants. We've spent a significant amount of time translating all those benefits that go to the landlord into hard numbers on what is the actual property value increase, what is the actual cost savings on maintenance by having upgraded systems, what is the dollar number you can save through increased tenant retention, through having this upgraded units that is at a lower operating cost to the tenant, and having those, apples to apples numbers comparison does help a lot in the conversation with convincing people.
Well, I'm really glad that I let Nicola go first because she started to hit on exactly what I was going to hit on. We at MEA have been gaining, I think, a lot of traction in the discussion around clean energy and climate benefits because electricity has become such an affordability issue lately. And frankly, we sort of lead with the cheapest kilowatt is the one you don't have to generate. And so if we're talking about energy efficiency and we're talking about putting money into weatherization and ways to reduce the amount of energy that we have to use or generate, that does equate to savings. And as folks are unfortunately seeing their bills rising over time, this is a message that we're finding resonates more and more with folks. And so if we can then couple that with the climate benefits, folks can understand that they're saving money, they're improving their indoor air quality, they're improving the climate, and it really does begin to create a more holistic message that is resonating with folks.
Yeah, answers keep dovetailing into the next question, which is great. So thanks. Checks in the mail. So I have one more question, and then it's going to be a big one because we're running up on time and we're trying to get a lot of audience questions. And then Brian will have a lightning round question to where you all get a quick thought on what we should include in our April forum. But the question right now is, so Jen, you just talked about all the efforts going on to reduce energy, right? So Empower program and weatherization, innovations from DHCD to make sure that we're supporting weatherization, reducing demand. And we've seen the effectiveness of reducing demand on our grid, right? And on people's energy bills and on people's health because of improved indoor air quality. On the flip side, we got a lot of questions about data centers in the chat here. That's sort of the flip side of reducing energy demand, if you will. And so we're seeing an anticipated large increase in demand across the grid. Maryland is actually a relatively small contributor to that. And yet we're going to end up paying for a lot of that as the structure is right now, part of which is because of the way our regional grid operator, PJM, makes decisions. So see how I'm trying to weave everything together. And we got to make sure that the decisions we make about these payments and then the type of energy that we're using, the type of energy we're using to create this electricity, we have to use an equity lens on those decisions. And so, when, for example, we're looking at a docket at the Public Service Commission right now that has at least 749 megawatts of new gas generation proposed for the state of Maryland, which would seem to be counter to about the last hour and 45 minutes of conversation we've been having. So, and this is, I'm an advocate, so I can say things like that. So, but so the big question to you all is, how are your agencies in the context of our climate plan thinking about energy generation in the face of rising demand as we think about using an equity lens to make these decisions? And I think I wrapped in about a dozen questions from the chat in there. So, and you all have about 90 seconds each. So go for it.
Yes. No, I'm just kidding. I think you're hitting on a lot of things, Rebecca, that are front of mind probably for everybody on this call. We are seeing demand for energy increase for the first time in decades because we have historically been very successful at reducing demand through things like energy efficiency. We need to bring all of that back front and center. And there's lots of ways that we can be reducing demand with, time of use rates, with energy efficiency, with storage, and really thinking about where that storage is going, not just sort of doing it scattershot. So there are a lot of strategies there that I think a lot of our agencies are spending time working on. I will also say that the governor has taken a particular interest in what's going on at PJM and has been playing a very active role with other governors in this space, because traditionally PJM hasn't really offered our states a seat at the table. And that's starting to change because our governors are becoming very vocal about the impacts of some of their decision-making or maybe lack of decision-making that has been directly impacting our residents. So I do expect that that engagement is going to continue to try to change some of the policies and the decision-making that's happening regionally. Because you also said Maryland is a relatively small state within a large PJM region. Our demand increase is relatively small when you look at the whole region, but we can't ignore the fact that energy is a regional issue. So we're working on a lot of these things with a lot of the partners that are on the screen, as well as the Public Service Commission and the governor's office. And I do think it's going to take some comprehensive strategies to really make a dent.
Anyone else want to take on the 90-second challenge? Go ahead,
This
Darren.
this is not in my wheelhouse, but I noticed Jen mentioned the PSC, and they would be a good addition to this table. What they do here is crucial.
MDE, DHCD.
I don't have anything to add.
Great.
I'll note that one of our 10 KPI indicators for the climate subcabinet relates directly to decarbonizing the grid and thinking about the multiple tools in our toolbox for doing that. So I just want to highlight for folks here, these questions that you're asking are important and they are relevant to our ongoing work together. So in addition to the things Jen mentioned, we are trying to track progress on that very particularly.
All right, then for the final question, I love that throughout this, I feel like our next question has been just absolutely teed up by the responses from the former ones. It's been amazing. Um, Beyond the Public Services Commission, as we think about this as a whole of government approach, what agencies would be most useful for us to invite in for our April gathering, in addition to the four here represented?
Well, you've got a sub-cabinet report highlighting everything that 25 agencies are doing. We all know we play different parts and different roles. The ones here have significant, policy responsibility under the Climate Pollution Reduction Plan. But if we're talking about net zero, that also includes DNR and MDA, and I think the PSC is another great addition. They do issue annual agency reports talking about the work that they're doing on these topics. So I think many of the agencies that are included in the report, you can see the updates that they have, I'm sure would be interested in joining the conversation. So just a flag at that level.
Any others? Final comments?
I guess here's a challenge. Here's a different way of asking it. What would you all like to be asked in April?
Mm.
Don't worry, we're just recording and you'll be held to it. So
I'd welcome utilizing some of the April time as a conversation and a discussion to be generative with ideas, because just like you're hearing from us about all the ways that we're working to implement the goals and think more creatively, we need you to help us do that. So hearing ideas from you, kind of considering some of that as part of a dialogue and discussion is really helpful. Obviously, there are different forums for doing that. I know just for MDE, across all those things I talked about, we have extensive stakeholder engagement that we're doing. And if you're really passionate about one of those specific topics, let's say our buildings, please come show up at our opportunities for stakeholder engagement and our public meetings, because those are really great opportunities for us to hear from you directly on those specifics. So just a plug there to help us understand your ideas and see how you can help us do more together.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in terms of timing of the April meeting, I'd suggest it happens after CNDI, so we can determine once the dust is settled, what came out of session. And we can also assess the landscape in terms of other considerations. For example, I think next year is going to be make or break in terms of vehicle electrification progress and whether or not it genuinely is at risk of stalling or just slowing. So we can better figure out what to do moving forward. And then I guess the last thing I'd say is in terms of moving forward, I would look beyond 26. I'm interested in the runway out to 2030, right? What can we do? What do we need to do, right? What's possible beyond just the year we're in.
And I'm seeing great comments in the chat about comptroller, the Department of Education. And there was a related question about any plans for Climate Education Week in 2026. So Secretary McElwain, I see your hand up. Maybe this is part of it. Maybe the agencies forum is part of Climate Education Week, assuming it's after Sine Die. Totally agree.
I raised my hand before you said that. I just wanted to contribute to what you asked before. I think DGS would be a good agency to bring because we highlighted all the things that they're doing in terms of in the report in terms of state operations. It was in the press release as well, some real major wins. So I think DGS, because honestly, they're the ones who are going to advance, of course, MDOT and others, but DGS has a really big role in electrifying fleets and buildings and just all the things that they're doing. So that's my recommendation.
Nicola?
And I will throw in the Department of Labor. They play a really key role specifically in the built environment space that we're operating in. Building codes are doing a really good job at driving, implementation of some of the changes that we need to see in the built environment, and also their work on workforce development to help build the workforce that, is required to implement all this work that we're trying to do in the field. So I see the Department of Labor as playing a really crucial role here. And then along those terms, we touched a bit on funding today as being one of the primary concerns and barriers that we see, but maybe we can expand the discussion a little bit more too in the next session about other barriers that we're seeing to adoption and driving forward the climate goals.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. We caught up on time and I think got a lot answered. So just on behalf of Climate Partners, thanks everyone for joining. Going to hand it back over to Laura to bring us home. But just we still have a really great audience for a 2-hour webinar in the middle of the day. So just huge thanks to everyone participating. And you heard it from all the agencies, and now you're going to hear it from us. We need you all. So get engaged, join Climate Partners. If you heard about it from another group, Climate Partners is a coalition and we welcome you. So please get in touch with Laura to join and start thinking about the questions you want to bring in April. And we look forward to seeing you then with lots of communication in between. But to the agencies here, thank you. These are not climate implementation plans that are going to sit on a shelf. We know you're serious about this and you're doing the work. And we're here to make sure you do. To be partners in the work with you. We really appreciate your time today and all the work that you do for the state of Maryland.
Yes, thank you so much.
And a big thank you to Rebecca and Brian for moderating our panel discussion. I know they put a lot of effort into preparing for this conversation. And yeah, I'm, again, just really thankful for all of you to share your time and your expertise, and look forward to continuing the conversation along with many other state agency colleagues. I'll say it one last time for today. The recording and slides will be available on Climate Partners blog in a not too distant future. We ask that you please share the recording and materials with colleagues who you think would benefit from hearing this conversation. And of course, be on the lookout for announcements about our April Agencies Forum, which will be in person. We will share updates on that with all webinar registrants. Planning is in process with our partners at MDE to make sure that we have a really robust event after Sine Die, reflecting on the outcomes of the legislative session and looking forward to what else we can accomplish in 2026. So one last thank you to our presenters and for our audience for your great questions and your active participation. We look forward to staying engaged. And as Rebecca said, if you have any questions about Climate Partners or next steps, please feel free to reach out to me. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.